Hello and welcome to the romance track here at Continual. Tonight we are talking about cowboys. So before we get into all those, luscious guys with the hats and the boots and the horses, we're going to let our wonderful authors introduce themselves, starting with Nina.
Oh, okay. Well, hello. I'm Nina Crespo. I write books that range from sizzling to small town sexy.
Nice. And Susan.
Right. My name is Susan Roddey. I write all different types of romance as Siobhan Kincaid.
Okay, Lucy.
I am Lucy Blue, and I am, in addition to being a writer, the senior editor. My title keeps changing, so I keep forgetting. Senior editor for Falstaff Crush, which is the romance line from Falstaff Books out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I write mostly historical romance, mostly paranormal romance, and also horror.
Okay. Ari, and you brought your own handsome hunks to the party. Tell us about it.
I did. I'm Ari McKay, and with my writing partner, Rachel Langella, we write historical cowboys, and we also write action adventure, and under the Rachel Langella brand, we write paranormal.
Okay, Jenny.
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Doll Books, which is science fiction with a lot of action, romance, and humor. But I write in every genre and under a variety of pen names. And as A.E. Stanton, I write novels set in the Old West, which have to have cowboys in them.
Of course they do. Trish.
Hi, I'm Trish Milburn, and I've written a little bit of everything over the years. A lot of it has been Westerns, contemporary Westerns for first Harlequin American, then it switched to Harlequin Western, and then it went away. And then I did 3 for Thule Publishing. And most recently, I've had my first book from Harlequin, Heartwarming, come out. And I also, in a completely different type of story, I also write a series set in the world of K-pop, which is Korean pop music.
Nice. And I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy, including some steampunk that is set in the late 1890s that has some folks who used to be cowboys before they joined the Department of Supernatural Investigation. And as Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance with a series coming up this spring, starting off with Peacemaker. That is what you'd have if you mashed Supernatural and Wild Wild West together, and if Jim and Artie were together. So definitely some cowboys and trains and all that good stuff. Now, why cowboys? I mean, I've got my reasons, but what are yours, Susan?
I really don't know how to answer that. There's knowing the stuff that I read and the stuff that the people I know write, I would say that there is something a little wholesome about cowboys, but we also know that's very not true. I don't know. I guess for me, it's the illusion of simplicity that comes with a lot of the cowboy romance stories. You have that, it's like a slower pace of life. I'm trying to get the words to work right. It's like there's less demand to think really hard about what's going on. You don't have the hustle and bustle of the city. You don't have all of the political intrigue. What intrigue you do have is entertaining and fun. And at the end of the day, for me, it's kind of like popcorn. It's something that's relatively easy to read. It's fun to read, and I can go through a bunch of them in a week.
Okay. Lucy?
Well, you've mentioned Wild Wild West. The only Western that I've done so far is called Bury Me Not, and my publisher describes it as if Drew Barrymore's character in Bad Girls and Russell Crowe's character in The Quick and the Dead got together to fornicate and fight zombies. It's very right. And what attracts me to Westerns, I've always loved them, but what attracts me to Westerns is the same thing that attracted me to the medievals that I write. It is a mythic world with the illusion of realism. Like particularly when you start talking about the steampunk and the Wild Wild West, the weird Westerns, the people can have very realistic motivations. The settings and the costumes and everything are recognizable in a way that maybe science fiction and pure fantasy is not. But you still have that freedom to be as unreal as you want to be. And I really, really enjoy that.
Okay. Ari?
And cowboys are sexy as hell.
That too.
Oh, leading off of that, yes, they are sexy as hell. And the reason that I have always loved Westerns is Pernell Roberts from Bonanza and Lee Majors when he was on Big Valley. And I grew up watching those, and I have always, always loved the big wide open sky. I guess being from Florida, so I never saw the plains and all that kind of stuff. So it's like things like Texas and Nevada just enchanted me. The thought of, you know, the big wide open plains and the gorgeous guys on gorgeous horses, because I also had a horse thing when I was a girl, like I think most girls do.
Didn't we all?
Yes. So yeah, that's what, you know, actually inspired most of the historical Westerns that Rachel and I have written. So yeah, you might catch glimpses of Bonanza and Big Valley in our books.
Yeah, I was more of a Little Joe fan, but you know, Pernell Roberts will do. Ginny?
I think it's the romanticism of the frontier. We have absolutely romanticized what it was like. I mean, the West was incredibly barbaric. It was, I mean, let's not even discuss medicine and dentistry. It was a very wild place. And I don't think any of us would have actually really enjoyed living there at that time. But the romanticization of it has made it something that really is, you know, they've got a code, you know, you never shoot a man in the back, and you know, you shouldn't, only an evil varmint's going to do something like that to a lady, and those kind of things that give us an ideal that is very fun to play with and fun to write with. I don't think it's necessarily a simple time. I mean, nothing I write is all that simple. My characters are both on both sides of the law, fighting for what's right, but doing it in their own ways. There's a lot of action, but I just think that people like Westerns because of, you can imagine what it would have been like to be in those days, you know, ignoring the fact that penicillin is really a good thing unless you're allergic to it. And it just sounds fun. It's an escapism thing that into the past that is a more active past than, you know, I mean, it's fine to think about the Victorian era and things like that, but it was pretty stuffy. And there was a lot of freedom, you know, on the range. It was you and your horse and your pards, if you had any. And if you were going to survive, it's really down to you. And I think there's that rugged individualism that we associate with the West that I think is one of the reasons why cowboys are so appealing.
Okay. Trish?
Well, like so many others, I kind of grew up watching Westerns. They were usually the old ones that were made before I was born, but they were like on one of the 3 TV channels we had when I was growing up, like on Saturday afternoons. So I liked those. And then when I got to be a teenager, there was a show called The Young Riders. I don't know if anybody remembers that.
Oh, yeah.
But I loved that show. So I've always loved history. It's like, even when I was a kid, you remember like there were those mini series in the 80s, you know, it was like Shogun and, you know, all those. I just ate that stuff up. I would watch it and then I would read about the real history, you know, that they had fictionalized. So that's just kind of always been my thing.
Lonesome Dove, baby.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there were so many of them. So I kind of always like that. And then another thing is just I think the setting is also a character in Westerns. Just the beauty it's like, I live in Florida now, so I was kind of laughing at that comment that Ari made. But I grew up in Kentucky, which is also very different from, once you get past, the Mississippi River going west. So it's just so open, and you can see so far, and it's so different. It's almost like another planet from, what you're used to growing up. But yes, as has been said too, it's like it was romanticized, just like contemporaries about small towns are romanticized, because I grew up in a small town. It is not that bucolic. But but the same thing, it's like pretty much any genre of subgenre in romance is by definition romanticized. It's not, you can have elements of realism, but you're going to have the fictionalized parts too. So, but yeah, it's just, whether it's K-pop books or Western books or any of the young adult books I've written, it's kind of escaping into something that's out of what you're used to every day.
Yeah, I think, for me, it's the illusion of independence, the myth that we've made about the cowboys, that they, were just larger than life. And I think it's kind of funny, 3 things I found out when I was researching. One, the cowboy era only lasted 15 years for real before they fenced the range. 100 years in movies, TV, and books, but 15 for real. There were more ice cream parlors in San Francisco during the gold rush than there were saloons and brothels.
Oh, wow.
Hate to break it to you. And there was a town in Arizona called Canyon Diablo it was a railroad town. It had shot so many lawmen that Wyatt Earp wouldn't go there. So gives you an idea. It was a rough neighborhood. Nina, how about you?
Well, I mean, I have to be honest. I did not see myself writing about cowboys. I was approached about it from the standpoint of actually writing about cowgirls. I grew up in the Southwest around cowboys, and so it wasn't something that was a foreign idea to me. But I was intrigued with the opportunity to be able to write about modern cowgirls and cowboys in today. And so particularly from the standpoint of cowgirls and cowboys of color, which are not always recognized or seen, particularly in books. And so to be able to write The Cowboy's Claim, which I did for Harlequin, was really an exciting thing to do. And it was fun to be able to put a spin on it in terms of a family that owns a horse stable and all of the things that they're involved in, and just the fun and the shenanigans and the romance that goes along with it. So yeah, that's how I ended up doing it.
Cool. All right. So when we're writing cowboy stories now, what if any changes do you make from maybe the Westerns that you watched or read growing up when you're writing your Westerns now? For example, Ari and I both write male romance. There were definitely gay cowboys before Brokeback Mountain. There were a lot of folks who went west to reinvent themselves for a whole lot of reasons. And that included, their gender and sexuality. Nina mentioned cowboys and cowgirls of color. A lot of those things weren't in the Westerns or the cowboy romances that we might have seen growing up. What do you do with that, Lucy?
Well, one thing, my heroine, if I just describe her, sounds like the most cliched Western heroine ever, because she is a saloon dove. She's a prostitute, and she's blonde, and she's really pretty. She's also mean as hell, and very, very smart, and very, very pragmatic. And her relationship with the hero is, it starts off, you think that he's going to be rescuing her from the zombies, when in fact it turns around that no, she's the one that figures out how to do this. And basically he becomes her muscle more than her becoming his sweetheart. And that, I started out as just a short story, and I ended up doing 2 more stories about this couple because I love them so much. And over the course of their relationship, Susan said something about it, Westerns being simpler. And I think that one way that is that you have these archetypes of the cowboy, the saloon dove, the school marm, the, whatever. And I think that to make the stories accessible to an audience now, you kind of have to be willing to play with that a little bit. And not so much that you have, contemporary sounding people in 1881, but enough that your readership can relate to them. Although I will say, there's always going to be an audience for that classic, the bad boy. I always think about it, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kids. Everybody seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? You know the scene where the Sundance Kid, where we see Ella the first time, and he comes in with the gun, and you think at first that he is compelling her at gunpoint to take her clothes off, when in fact they are a long-term couple and this is a game. I think that's always going to be something that hasn't always, I know I love it and it's going to be appealing, but I think that knowing what we do now about what the West was really like, and knowing what we do now about relationships and how they can be better or more fulfilling or more meaningful or more equal or whatever, that can make richer stories. I kind of wandered away, sorry.
It's okay. Ari.
Well, it actually goes to a lot of what you're talking about, of course, since writing gay couples. And every one of the couples in our Westerns, there always is an outsider, someone who is, by dint of their race or their sexuality or both, is looking for a place to belong, looking for a place that isn't going to be as judgmental as back east, if you will. And I think that, when you're talking about these massive spreads of land and these little tiny towns, because that's how we tend to set ours, is not in big places like San Francisco or Dallas or anything like that. Ours are all set in little tiny fictional towns where people are going, and they have, the ranches where the guys can be more who they are than trying to live up to social expectations. And in fact, two of our stories are set at Bent Oak Ranch, which is where a bunch of like-minded guys kind of end up together, where it's like, okay, yeah, it's never really stated to each other that they're gay, but all of them kind of understand that, and they just mind their own business and leave each other alone. And it works for them. So that's, one of the things that we enjoy writing most, is giving these outsiders a place to belong, a place where their society is normal for them.
Okay, Gini.
You know what? I've been so intent on listening to everybody. What was the question?
How do you write a story written now that takes into consideration the reality of the West that didn't really get reflected in a lot of different ways in the stuff we grew up with?
Okay. I really strive for historical accuracy. Legend of Belladonna, Natural Born Outlaws. This is actually the first, I learned to writing that book, and I ended up becoming an Old West expert because of it, because I had to read so much about it. 1 in every 4 cowboys was Black. People were bringing their prejudices in, but it was really because of the elements. It was very much, I don't even care what color you are, as long as you're not one of the Indian tribes that's going to kill me for being here. Oh, you're friendly, great, you can join us too. Because you never knew if you were going to make it through the night. There's a lot, rattlesnakes, scorpions, cougars, wolves, people that don't want you around. It's very rugged. It was very rugged. It was very dangerous. And there was no 6 degrees of separation. Everybody knew each other. I mean, they really did. There were not as many people west of the Mississippi as you would think. And I grew up in the Southwest, like Nina, so I have some of that and then, talking to various people, depends on what town you're in Tucson area and down to the border. The Earps and Doc Holliday are loathed as murderous criminals who killed those nice McLaury boys and who were murderers. That's how they're viewed, because it all depends on whose side of the story you're on and how you spin it. And Wyatt Earp made it into pictures. He lived long enough, and who lives longest gets to influence the stories. But I really strive for historical accuracy. If I say a character is in a real life character like Wyatt, Doc, Bat Masterson, so forth, are in an area, it's because they can be. I have researched that they can physically be right there interacting with the characters that I've created, to try to give some kind of reality. And my example of why, to me, it's important is Winchester 77. I had never seen the start of this movie, but I'd seen the last 2/3. It's great. It's a wonderful Western. So good. Stars Jimmy Stewart and Shelley Winters. And so for Christmas one year, my husband got me the movie, and I finally got to see the first third, which is completely historically inaccurate. At the time of this movie, Wyatt Earp's like 27 years old, and he's this little old man coming out with a big reputation, and I'm just like, so I can't stand that. I now will only watch the last 2/3 of that movie. But to me, I think because it is so easy to check a date now, to verify something, that I think being historically accurate is really important, and that at least it is to me. And so I make sure that's going on in everything.
Okay. Trish?
If you look back at the Westerns we watched when we were kids, they were all so very white. Even the Native American characters were played by white people. So that's, even in small towns out west, you may not have a lot of non-white people living there, but there are some, some more than others. If you live near a reservation, you're going to have more Native people. So I try to bring in some non-white characters into my books. I've had a Native heroine. I have the book that is coming out in April. She is also Native. And I have a secondary character in the story who will probably be a heroine in the future. She is half Native and half Korean. Her parents met when her dad was serving overseas. So I try to bring those in. And then also another thing is I try to give characters interests that are not cowboy related. Sometimes, like, people are not that one-dimensional a lot of the time. It's like they don't have to live, breathe, all their hobbies have to do with horses and cows, So the hero in my first Harlequin Heartwarming, yes, ranching is his main thing, but he has this past of having tried to be a Western artist. It didn't work out at the time, but he begins to rediscover that. It's kind of a hobby now, but it's there. So, and then the heroine, she grew up on a ranch, but then she went to college and left, and she became like a business consultant, and she traveled all around the world. So when she comes back, she brings all of that knowledge of all these places around the world and makes it work for her in her business that she starts in this small town. So I like to try to, the world is bigger than the setting. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, it's starting with the stories of the real people who lived in that time. Certainly there were a lot of folks who, for a lot of reasons, left the East Coast after the Civil War and wanted to start over. And that included not only people from the Army, but a lot of the Buffalo Soldiers and a lot of the emancipated individuals left to find someplace that they hoped would give them a better deal. And sometimes that worked and sometimes it didn't. We mentioned folks of different sexual orientation and gender. There were definitely trans individuals in the West, and we can find stories if you look hard enough. If you're looking for it, you can find it. And folks who, for the most part, were left alone, and a much broader variation in ethnic backgrounds. So many of the Westerns completely ignore the large Asian immigrant population that came over, particularly with the railroads.
Right.
And telling a story that really catches the vibrancy of the West, to me, should touch on as many of those as it makes sense to include in your particular story. Not that you have to jam them all into every story, but be aware that they're out there, and don't write with blinders on like they aren't, because this makes a much richer story and a much more interesting tapestry than, you know, anything John Wayne ever served up. Nina?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I have to admit, I love my soapy drama. So soapy drama is definitely a part of what I'm writing. But at the same time, you know, as I was doing my research and finding out which direction I wanted to go with this, as I mentioned, you know, the Maryland Cowgirls of Color were a big inspiration, in the sense of they had this sisterhood, and their story of how they became horsewomen. But also it branched out into this sense of family, you know, writing about family and legacy and love and struggles and disagreements between, you know, in this case, they're not siblings. With the story of my hero, he is running a horse stable with his cousins. And so I think, you know, just hitting on those universal themes that people could really relate to in terms of family relationships, as well as a love relationship as well. He falls in love with someone who is very different from him. It's a fish out of water story, basically, as he's fallen in love with an actress who has to learn how to ride a horse for a partner movie. So just being able to have fun with those differences as people learn to work through them and form those relationships, and particularly those love relationships that we love so well, and happily ever after stories.
Very nice. Susan?
Well, the difference with me is that I'm terrible at history. So every time I'm going to screw it up if I try, which is one of the reasons why what I write is a more modern contemporary setting. But, you know, like Lucy was talking about, you have the very specific archetypes that come with the Western setting. And I like being able to take those and make them into that modern, more relatable character. You know, you've got the cranky cowboy, you've got the school marm, you know, the school marm becomes, you know, a kindergarten teacher. And then you get this really kind of cute theme underneath that Western feel. You know, I like having towns and worlds that seem real. You know, you have all of these different personalities. People don't all look the same. They don't all sound the same. They all come from different places. But, you know, still, you've got the small town thing going on, which is so much easier to control, because you have a limited cast in what you're working on. And then you take this one person, say this kindergarten teacher that has moved in, that gives you your catalyst for the story. You know, you're still able to play with these characters, the people and the places you would have seen in that, you know, that particular time in history. But there's less of a chance I'm gonna screw it up if I make it modern, because I will be the first one to screw anything up that you hand me if you tell me I've got to keep it within a date range, because I can't do it.
Well, I actually do a lot of research and then purposely screw it up. My book, my Westerns are funny. And just to give you an idea, and I should be embarrassed, but I'm not. One archetype that is very, very popular in the Westerns of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the heyday of the Western originally in Hollywood, was the former Confederate general who has gone out west, okay? my hero was in the Confederate Army. And so all of his gang tell him continually, it don't matter what you do, Elbert, you're going to jail, going to hell because you were a Confederate. It's basically going out of my way to de-romanticize that kind of character. And again, I should be embarrassed, but I'm not. His two best friends, his two lieutenants, which if this series continues, will eventually have stories of their own. Gail was talking about how it's important to bring in the people who weren't white and weren't cis and weren't whatever, because those people did exist within that society, and why wouldn't they be there? Or you can just do it with a chainsaw like I did and make one of them Mexican and one of them Black. But again, okay, now maybe I am a little embarrassed. I feel like I can do that in a Western when I would never in a million years do it in something else, because it is this mythic, almost American fairy tale kind of thing. They are archetypes, and it is funny. I mean, there are also zombies and vampires and Krampus and that kind of stuff too. So yeah, Susan, don't feel bad about screwing up the history. At least you didn't do it on purpose.
But you can get away with a lot though, because as soon as you said vampires, you've got paranormal. You can do anything you want with paranormal.
Right.
I mean, that's the joy, is that you can say, that's like weird Westerns.
Right,
which
and that's what it is.
That's what it is. Yeah, my weird Westerns aren't really romances, but I do write them. And yeah, I mean, as soon as you've introduced a paranormal element, you can lose a lot of any of the Western tropes you think you need to hold on to, because the paranormal will essentially overpower it. So you might as well just lean into the paranormal portion.
Right.
Well, and that brings up my next question, which is, what are some of your favorite cowboy tropes and archetypes? So Ginny, take it away.
Oh, well, this is my true confession. As near as I can tell, every idea I've ever had in my life has come from the original Wild Wild West. So it doesn't matter what series. Yeah, I can spot the genus in the Wild Wild West. I love that show. So I already loved Weird Westerns with the steampunk feel, because that's really a very steampunky show. I like the honor that we associate so much with the West, that, it's the right thing to do. I'm bringing the cattle in because they need to be brought in. It would be easier to just let them and run off, but I'm not going to do it. I've got to bring in the bad guy. I've got to save whoever. I've got to save the day because it's the right thing to do. It's honor. I like all of that. I think that you could probably say I've never met a trope I didn't like in any genre, and that I wasn't willing to lean all the way in on in any genre. I think tropes and archetypes, stereotypes, all those things exist because we as humans like them. They make them things easier for us. They're almost a shorthand. And I don't mind upending a trope, but you got to understand the trope before you upend it. And I like them. I like Western tropes. I like the feel of Westerns. I like you can make them fast paced. You can make them slow paced. You have a lot you can do. It's a giant canvas with which to paint, both historically and in a contemporary setting. I mean, I grew up in a town an hour north of Los Angeles where we wore cowboy boots without irony. And we were a beach city, but we were also the agricultural seat. I learned to ride horses when I was in orchards when I was 5. So a lot of that's still there. It's there, particularly in the West, all over. And people, you wear a cowboy hat not because it looks good, though it does, but because it protects you from sunburn, the back and the front. You wear cowboy boots because they look good, but because they're comfortable and they hold the stirrup right. So if you're from the West, like I said, like Nina and I are, there's just stuff that's just permeates around you because it's just there. And I don't see any reason to not throw that in too. I like all of it. There probably isn't one thing I don't like other than the lily whiteness that we got shown for so long, which I don't do. But that's probably my only in the tropes, is that everyone was white.
Okay.
So
Ari, how about you?
Oh, goodness. Well, what's interesting for the Western tropes, for the way that Rachel and I write them, is that, of course, we kind of stand it on its head. In Quality of Mercy, we have the schoolmarm and the rugged ne'er-do-well cowboy, but the schoolmarm is actually also a guy. And, and our cowboy is Mexican, and he learned to speak English, and seduced his school teacher. And that's how we carry the story from there. But the tropes are just, when you cross gay romance tropes with the historical Western tropes, it can be really, really interesting in how you get the characterizations, because the guy with the secret, well, the secret wasn't that he robbed a bank or that he left a wife and children at home. He's in the closet, and he left the disapproval of his family to go west and find someplace to belong. So that's one thing that we like, is that there is so many different things that you can do when you get the intersection of the common Western tropes and then the gay romance tropes. And it can make for some really interesting stories. And I've like B.A. Tortuga also writes, she doesn't do historical, but she does gay cowboys in a modern setting. And it's always interesting reading her stuff and seeing the kind of things that have changed between the historical tropes and the modern cowboy tropes, which are, I think, a little different, because when you put modern technology in and the information search, it's like people can't leave their identities behind in a modern setting the way that they could in the historical setting. And that's one thing we really loved about doing historicals, is that it really was a blank slate. You are who you say you are. As long as you can back it up with the skills and you don't, mess up your story, you are who you say you are in the historical West. So that's probably one of our favorites, is the reinventing, yourself part of the historical trope, and then cross it with the gay romance tropes.
Okay. Trish.
A couple of things. I really like the connection to the land aspect of a Western. I started to say I've never written a historical. The very first thing I ever wrote romance-wise was a historical Western, which will never see the light of day. But even in contemporaries, there's still that, and it's like this some with just regular farmers too. There's a connection to the land that a lot of people over the generations have lost. So that's still there. And then kind of, whether it's an illusion or real, the freedom that seems to permeate sort of a Western setting. It's like you read romance for escapism, and to me that's sort of like, it was like a real escapism. It's like, we've all read stories where, like, and seen many a Hallmark movie where people from the city, their life is harried and everything. It's like, and then there's that illusion of a simpler, calmer, more relaxing, even though it's a lot of work, life in a smaller town, in a Western setting. So it's just sort of simpler,
Okay. Nina.
I think the things that I pulled from, maybe from a sense of trope, was pride and legacy. But that's also something that I picked up on in the cowboys that I met growing up. In that sense of pride in who they are, pride in family, pride in where they came from, and that sense of wanting to continue the legacy that they were so proud of. On the other hand, I did want to break away from again, what people kind of envisioned what it should be in putting the family on the East Coast, because hey, cowboys are everywhere. Cowboys are everywhere, ranches are everywhere, farms are everywhere. And so being able to kind of broaden people's vision, if you will, hopefully as they're reading the story in terms of what they see as far as cowboys and cowgirls and where they belong.
Okay, Susan?
I really like the, it was mentioned the connection to the land, but I really like the sense of duty and purpose that you get with Western heroes. There's a difference in the way these characters were raised and the things that they believe in. They have, the code of honor was mentioned. It's that idea that they are dependable and reliable, and you get that steadfastness that you don't see in a lot of other areas, I guess. Especially in with the world the way it is today, you don't see a whole lot of that steadfast dependability anymore. Everything is so changeable that it's almost like a nod to the way things used to be, and it's comforting.
Okay, Lucy?
Well, outlaws, which is kind of the opposite of everything Susan just said. No, but not really, but they think they are. And it's the same kind of bad boy trope that you see in so many things, whether it's the Black Knight or the gangster or whatever. You have, and again, male and female in my books fall into this, because these are people who, I mean, I made a joke before, but they really do think that they're damned. They think that they think of themselves as bad people. And of course, the story shows that no, they're not, because when push comes to shove, they do the right thing. They just don't always realize it's the right thing. And they do have a code. It's just different from other people's code. And the idea, everybody's talked about people reinventing themselves, and the notion of redemption, that's very much a theme in the stuff that I'm writing, because through the actions these people, in this relationship, we have two people who have always considered themselves as unlovable and bad and damned, and they fall in love with one another in a time of crisis, which is another thing that, even though it's a paranormal thing, that's because they're zombies. It's also very much a thing in Westerns too. I think Jenny mentioned, if you're fighting to survive, you're less worried about, oh, by the way, did you use the right fork at dinner, or are you the same social class as me, or whatever. And so because they have to come together to survive the zombie attack, they get to know each other, and their initial attraction is, my God, this is somebody who's just as bad as I am. And over the course of the book, they realize that, yeah, this is also someone who's just as good as I am. This is someone who sees me for what I really am and also sees the good in me. And that's, to me, that's the best kind of romance, that, two people come together and make each other better. And I think that that is something that you see over and over again in Westerns.
Okay. Well, folks, we have blown through our time. We could keep going. It's all great stuff, but we're going to have to wrap up. So let's go around and let everybody know if you've got a new, recent, or upcoming book, and also where people can find you online. Ari?
You can find us at arimckay.com. I'm also Ari McKay on Facebook, and Rachel Langella on Facebook. And right now, we just actually got the rights back to all 3 of our historical Westerns from a publisher that shall not be named, and are in the process of self-pubbing them. So unfortunately, our beautiful covers are going to change. But you can also find us on Amazon, so as Ari McKay and Rachel Langella. So
nice.
That's where we are.
Jenny?
www.ginikoch.com is my website. I am on Facebook far more than I should be, and I have 2 fan pages there, author of the Catherine Kitty Cat series and Gini Koch Hairspray and Rock and Roll. I'm also on Twitter, and I used to be really active on it, got very quiet on it. It looks like I'm going to be real active on it again. I have a Pinterest page, and I keep begging people. I also have an Instagram. Please don't go there. I can't make it work. Please stop sending me messages there. Send me messages in Messenger on Facebook where you can find me.
Okay, Trish?
My website is www.trishmilburn.com. I'm on, all the social medias, but I'm most active on Twitter at Trish Milburn. You will see definitely more of my K-pop and K-drama fascination there because I tweet about it all the time. The next Western I have coming out is Reclaiming the Rancher's Son, which comes out from Harlequin and Heartwarming in April. I will be having a new K-pop book sometime this month as soon as I get a couple of things squared away. So that's it.
Very nice. Nina?
You can find me at ninacrespo.com. All of my social media handles are there. I'm most active on Instagram. That's my happy place. So if you're looking for me, that's where you'll find me. I just recently had a book release that's actually part of the Tilbridge Stables world. It's adjacent. It's in the Small Town Secrets series, and it's called A Chef's Kiss. So check it out.
Nice. Susan?
Right. My romance can be found at ShivanKincaid.com. I am on most of the social media under my real name, Susan Roddey. That's generally where you're going to find me on Facebook. And I actually have a re-release. My first Cowboy Romance, Homegrown Hearts, will be back out in print next week.
Okay, Lucy?
First of all, Homegrown Hearts is a really great book. You should read it. I've read it. I love it.
She was my editor.
Secondly, I am everywhere as Lucy Blue. I am on Instagram with lots of pictures of my dog, who's very cute. I'm on Facebook as Lucy Blue. My website is actually my blog because I am just as long-winded there as I am here, and that is Lucy Blue Castle WordPress. I am on Twitter as at Lucy Blue Castle. And that's pretty much where you can find me. Again, the only actual Western that I have published is this one. It's called Bury Me Not, spelled backwards. But that is available, of course, from Amazon. My latest book is horror, The Devil Makes Three, and that came out in October. And coming up next for me is probably going to be the latest installment in my 1920s set murder mysteries, the Stella Hart mysteries. She is a silent movie actress who keeps tumbling over corpses and having to solve the murders. But that's me.
I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. Get the name spelled right. You're going to find me not only at my webpage, but that's what's on all of the social media as well. Our latest book is Shutdown Crew, which is a Wasteland Marshals book. Not exactly a Western, but they are the last 2 U.S. Marshals in a near future post-apocalyptic world, and they ride horses because everybody ran out of gas. So kind of Western adjacent. They're in Western Pennsylvania. That should count. Anyhow, most of the time you can find me here on Continual. So thank you all for sharing your evening with us tonight and sharing your cowboys with us. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more romance coming up here on Continual, so we'll see you online.